28-year-old Joseph Lancia is facing new charges. He is already charged with assault with intent to after he fired a gun at a passing truck last June.
The Hells Angels aren't just about bikes and leather. They've been home to some of the most dangerous criminals alive. These are the men who turned city streets into war zones.
At least 9 bullets fired from a handgun into this Cloverdale home. Detectives now investigating whether the Hells Angels motorcycle gang is responsible.
Making headlines with mass killings, bombings, and executions that shocked the world. From bloody turf wars that left bodies stacked to hits designed to silence cops and witnesses, this is as dark as it gets. Number 10. David McDonald Carroll. David McDonald Carroll wasn't just a biker, he was the Hells Angels' ghost story. Always there, always feared, but never caught. Born in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, he took charge of the 13th tribe and flipped it into the Angels' first Atlantic Canada chapter on December 5, 1984, naming himself president. Not even a year later, on March 24, 1985, he was at the center of the bloody Lennoxville massacre, a ruthless internal purge where 5 members of the Laval crew were slaughtered. Carroll was allegedly one of the men who pulled the trigger, yet he managed to walk away untouched. Halifax cops knew him for more than biker wars. In May 1986, he and his Halifax crew were busted for pimping, officially charged with living off the avails of. He ended up serving a year in prison, and even there, his legend grew. A psych evaluation labeled him as having a genius IQ. When he got out, it was the same story. By 1988, he faced another murder case tied to a drug debt in Dartmouth, and once again, he walked free. By 1990, he had shifted his base to Morin Heights, in Quebec's Laurentians, with his partner and son, locking himself into Montreal's underworld while still running Halifax, and keeping the Halifax to Montreal drug pipeline alive. Inside the Angels, Carroll wasn't a background figure. He was a heavyweight. He wore the filthy few patch with SS-style runes, which police read as a signal that he had killed for the club. He rode with the Nomads, the Quebec elite, led by Maurice "Mom" Boucher, and even mentored Danny Kane, a police informant who later turned against the Angels. Carroll also thought bigger than most. Investigators later revealed he floated the idea of bombing the Loners Clubhouse in Ontario as a way to strong-arm an alliance. But the real heat came on March 28, 2001. Quebec police launched Operation Springtime, a massive sweep on the Angels, and Carroll was suddenly facing 13 first-degree murder charges, along with a long list of other indictments. The timing was insane. He happened to be in Ixtapa, Mexico that very week. Canada filed extradition papers that morning, but Mexican police claimed they couldn't find him. A Crown affidavit later said Carroll had about $1 million sitting in a numbered bank account in Antigua, plenty of cash to disappear forever. And disappear he did. After that, he was a ghost. Interpol bulletins said he bounced between Mexico, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the US, and across Europe and South America. Canadian media kept chasing his shadow, reporting sightings and tips. In 2012, there were reports of him in Australia, and by 2016, he was still officially one of Canada's top fugitives, the outlaw the law could never reel in. Number 9. Paul Merle Eichheid.
After almost 2 decades on the run, a Hells Angel gang member is back in U.S. custody for the gruesome murder of a local woman.
Paul Merle Eichheid looked like the last guy you'd expect to be tied to the Hells Angels. By day, he wore a suit, worked as a stockbroker, and even spent time at Charles Schwab. But once the office hours ended, he lived a different life. He was prospecting with the Mesa Hells Angels, trying to prove himself to a club that only respected loyalty and violence. That life came crashing down in late October of 2001. At a party inside the Mesa clubhouse, 44-year-old Cynthia Garcia, a mother who had been drinking, mouthed off to some of the bikers. Words turned into fists. Ice Kide and Full Patch member Kevin J. Augustiniak beat her until she was unconscious. They stuffed her in a car trunk and drove her out into the desert near the Salt River. What happened next was pure horror. Garcia was stabbed more than 30 times, and they even tried to cut off her head. Days later, her body was found, showing just how brutal the attack had been. The murder didn't stay a secret. It was pulled into Operation Black Biscuit, a massive undercover ATF sting against the Hells Angels.
What we're doing is we're creating the illusion that the victim of our hit.
Another biker from that night, Michael Mesa Mike Kramer, flipped and started working with agents. He gave them details of what happened, even handing over taped conversations. In one affidavit, Augustiniak bragged that the killing was meant to send a message, even talking about cutting off Garcia's head to make an example. In 2003, a grand jury indicted Ice Kide on racketeering charges that included kidnapping and murder. Shockingly, despite the charges, a judge let him out with just an ankle monitor, pointing to his thin criminal record. Ice Kide cut it off and vanished. His escape could have been a movie script. He got a fake passport with help from Robert Eugene Tuteki, who later served 9 months in federal prison for that, and completely changed his look. He grew out his hair, added a beard, and disappeared overseas. By 2007, the U.S. Marshals put him on their 15 most wanted list. It all came to an end in February 2011, when police in San Isidro, a suburb of Buenos Aires, arrested him. They found IDs tied back to his fake passport. He fought extradition for 7 years, but in July 2018, he was flown back to Phoenix and booked into the Maricopa County Jail. Others from that night paid too. Kevin Augustiniak pled guilty to second-degree murder in October 2011 and got 23.5 years. As for Ice Kide, his case finally wrapped up in August 2021. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 19 years in Arizona State Prison. Records show he's due for release in January 2030. Number 8. Maurice "Mom" Boucher.
It's a time that, looking back, is almost hard to believe.
Maurice "Mom" Boucher wasn't just a Hells Angel. He wanted to rule Quebec like it was his own empire. He started off small, breaking into houses and pulling off robberies. But by the early 1980s, he had joined the SS Motorcycle Club, a small white supremacist gang in East End, Montreal. In 1984, he was sent to prison after a rape conviction. 2 years later, he walked out and wasted no time patching into the Hells Angels. By May 1st, 1987, he had his full patch, and everyone could see he was aiming higher than most. By the mid-90s, Boucher had built his own powerhouse chapter inside the Angels, the Nomads. This wasn't a crew stuck to one neighborhood. They were built to move across Quebec and crush the drug trade wherever they went. That's when the Quebec Biker War broke out, running from 1994 until 2002. On one side was the Rock Machine. On the other were the Hells Angels with Boucher as their figurehead. The war was brutal. Around 162 people were killed. More than 80 bombings shook the province, and over 100 arsons lit up the streets. One of the most shocking moments came in August 1995, when an 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, was killed after a car bomb exploded in Montreal. Boucher didn't stop there. In 1997, he ordered hits that changed everything. Correctional Officer Diane Levine was killed on June 26th, and Pierre Rondeau was ambushed and killed on September 8th. Another officer, Robert Corriveau, was also attacked but managed to survive. These attacks weren't random. They were meant to terrify the justice system and keep bikers from turning informant. Boucher was eventually arrested and charged for ordering the hits.
But when Boucher was arrested in 1997, he was already a household name. He wouldn't be behind bars for long, and his reputation was still growing.
And at first it looked like he might walk away clean. In 1998, a jury found him not guilty. But that victory didn't last. In 2000, an appeals court threw out the verdict and sent him back to trial. This time, hitman Stéphane Gagné testified against him, and in May 2002, Boucher was finally found guilty of the 2 murders and the attempted murder. He was sentenced to life with no parole for 25 years and sent to Canada's toughest prison in Sainte-Anne-des-Plaines. Even behind bars, he kept scheming. In 2015, investigators uncovered that he was using his daughter, Alexandra Mongeau, and his ally, Gregory Woolley, to organize a hit on mafia figure Reynald Desjardins. He pleaded guilty in April 2018 and got 10 more years, though it ran alongside his life sentence. By then, even the Hells Angels had cut him off. Reports said the club expelled him while he was locked away. His health collapsed soon after. In 2022, he was diagnosed with metastatic throat cancer and transferred for palliative care. On July 10, 2022, at 69 years old, Maurice "Mom" Boucher died in custody, leaving behind one of the bloodiest legacies the Hells Angels have ever had. Number 7. Yves Apache Trudeau. Yves Apache Trudeau was one of the deadliest men to ever wear the Hells Angels patch. And the scariest part was that he didn't look dangerous at all. At 5'6" and about 135 pounds, he looked clean-cut and almost forgettable. But Trudeau had one talent that made him lethal. He knew how to build and use explosives. He learned the trade in a factory and then carried it straight into the streets. He first rode with the Popeyes in Quebec, and when they patched over on December 5th, 1977, he became a founding member of the Hells Angels Laval chapter. The timing couldn't have been bloodier. The Angels and the Outlaws went to war almost immediately. On February 17, 1978, outside Brasserie Joey in Montreal, Trudeau opened fire, killing Robert Cote and wounding another man. A month later, on March 21st, he planted a car bomb that killed Gilles Cadaret, the president of the Outlaws Montreal chapter. By November 10th, he was at the doorstep of Outlaws boss Brian Powers in Sainte-Geneviève, where he shot him 9 times in the head. And on December 8th, he killed William Wycold by mistake, thinking he was another Outlaws leader. Between 1978 and 1983, Trudeau personally accounted for 18 of the 23 outlaws killed in the conflict. His violence wasn't limited to biker wars. Montreal's West End gang also paid for his skills. On October 27, 1981, he planted a bomb under Patrick Huey McGurnahan's Mercedes in Westmount on orders from drug boss Frank Dooney Ryan. Then, in November 1984, he delivered a television stuffed with explosives that killed 4 men tied to Ryan's murder. But inside the Hells Angels, things started falling apart. Heavy drug use and stolen profits were making members look like liabilities, and Trudeau knew what happened to liabilities. He skipped the infamous Lennoxville Purge on March 24, 1985, by checking into detox just days earlier. That decision likely saved his life, but it also marked the end of his run with the club. He was kicked out, told to remove his tattoos, and with a price on his head, he decided to flip. Later that same year, Trudeau shocked Canada by pleading guilty to 43 counts of manslaughter for murders carried out between 1970 and 1985. 29 victims were shot, 10 were killed with bombs, 3 were beaten, and 1 was strangled. In exchange for his guilty plea and cooperation, he was sentenced to life, but became eligible for parole after 7 years. In 1994, he walked free under a new identity, Denis Cote. He lived quietly near Salaberry de Valleyfield, worked regular jobs, but slipped back into cocaine. In March 2004, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy, got 4 years, and even the judge reminded him, "In your lifetime, you have killed more people than the Canadian military did in the Gulf War." By 2006, he had bone marrow cancer. In July 2008, he was paroled to a hospital where he died weeks later, still hated by the families of the many people he left dead. Number 6. Robert Chico Mora. Robert Chico Mora was one of the most dangerous men to ever wear the Hells Angels patch, but his story started before the red and white. He ran the Dirty Dozen's Tucson chapter, the crew that ruled Arizona's streets, and he was the muscle that kept rivals far away. In 1980, a bar fight in Globe turned bloody. 2 Bad Company bikers, David Howell and Laird Criley, ended up dead. Chico turned himself in, pleaded down to manslaughter, and got 5 years. He served about half, and while locked up, he made a name in the prison boxing ring, even claiming Golden Gloves champion status. By the time he walked out, he was 6'3", close to 300 pounds, and built like a tank. Back on the outside, Chico was the guy who made rules stick. If he spotted a rival patch in Tucson, he gave you 2 choices: take it off yourself, or he'd rip it off for you. He cruised the streets on his custom 1951 Harley chopper called the Red Dragon. In 1996, the Dirty Dozen voted to join the Hells Angels. After about 14 months of prospecting, they were officially patched in by 1997. Many who were there say Chico was the one who pushed the decision the hardest, determined to see Arizona fly the red and white. Once he wore the patch, he became a senior figure in the Phoenix Charter. His name popped up in Operation Black Biscuit, the massive undercover ATF sting that exploded on July 8, 2003. Federal and state officers carried out over 40 synchronized raids, seizing hundreds of guns and bombs.
Is that something that a gentleman's motorcycle club or any club would reasonably possess?
Prosecutors wanted to take down the club with sweeping RICO charges. They didn't land everything they hoped for, but the case still shook the Angels across the country. A TF sources believed Chico was planning to hit the Solo Angeles, not realizing they were actually undercover agents posing as a Mexican club. In 2004, Chico was convicted on a federal body armor charge and sentenced to 18 months, but the conviction was overturned the next year. After that, his life slowed down. Diabetes took a heavy toll. He lived in West Phoenix near a close friend, passing time with video games, books, and his little black chihuahua, Chica Ruca. On January 1st, 2014, at the age of 58, Chico Mora died from diabetes complications. He was laid to rest at Double Butte Cemetery in Tempe, leaving behind the story of a man who fought, ruled, and bled with the Hells Angels. Number 5. James Jim Brandes. James Jim Brandes was the Oakland Hells Angels hammer, the guy Sonny Barger called on when things got ugly in the late 1970s. He was vice president of the club, the muscle everyone feared, and his name was well known to every cop in the Bay Area. When Brandes showed up, violence usually followed. On November 14, 1977, Vallejo narcotics detective Bill Zerby stopped Brandes's Lincoln. What officers said they found inside was shocking. There was a pound of meth, a police radio, a radio band directory, a homemade siren with a blue flasher, a tape recorder, a transmitter, and even a device designed to detect surveillance. They also found a manual on booby traps, along with Zerby's personal information, his home address and license plate, written in Brandes' notebook. 2.5 months later, on January 30th, 1978, a bomb ripped through a car parked in front of Zerby's house as he was heading to court for Brandeis' drug case. Zerby survived, but the explosion destroyed much of his hearing and ended his career. Brandeis later told Rolling Stone, "Zerby drew a line and stepped over it." And Zerby wasn't the only one targeted. On February 19, 1977, months before that bust, San Jose Police Sergeant John Cracked had narrowly survived a bomb set near his car. Later, Brandeis was charged with that attempted murder during a massive RICO case designed to crush Oakland's Hells Angels. Prosecutors also connected him to a string of brutal killings in 1974.
A prominent Hells Angel and longtime spokesman for the outlaw motorcycle gang who died in March.
On June 16th, Oakland Hells Angel Ray Dale Stork Kefauver, who was about to testify for the state, was found shot dead in a ravine near Port Costa. Just weeks later, newlyweds Alvin and Mary Ellen Prater were found handcuffed, beaten, and executed near Sunol. In June 1979, Brandeis was formally charged in those murders during the federal racketeering sweep against Oakland area charters. The trials dragged on for years. After an 8-month trial, jurors deadlocked in July 1980. A retrial in February 1981 ended the same way, in a mistrial. Brandeis never took a murder conviction in those cases, but the cloud of suspicion never went away. His reputation carried far beyond California. Australian police later learned his nickname, the Assassin, while investigating a plot against a Melbourne cop. In their reports, they tied him directly to the Croc and Zerby bombings. In the end, he never escaped the cycle of drugs, bombs, and the law. Even without a murder conviction, the drug busts, the bomb plots, and the racketeering charges kept him tied to federal cases. By the early 90s, he was back behind bars. In 1994, James Jim Brandeis died by suicide in prison. By then, his reputation was already sealed, one of the most violent and feared enforcers the Hells Angels had ever unleashed. Number 4. Michael Jinx Genest. Michael Jinx Genest wasn't the kind of Hells Angel who needed to talk big. He was quiet, kept his head down, but when it came to the club's dirtiest work, he was trusted to get it done. Long before the bloodshed that made headlines, he was already on the radar. In July 1983, Outlaws boss Mario Parente and his crew opened fire on a bus in Wawa, Ontario, trying to kill Genest and another angel during a cross-country run. Nobody was killed, but that ambush proved just how badly rivals wanted him off the map. 2 years later came March 24th, 1985, the night that became infamous as the Lennoxville Massacre. The Hells Angels called what they said was a mandatory party at their Sherbrooke clubhouse, but it was a trap. 5 members of the Laval chapter walked through the door and were executed. Genest wasn't there. He was in a hospital bed, recovering from another failed outlaw's attempt on his life. That twist of fate spared him from being among the victims. The very next day, the South faction, who had staged the massacre, began issuing orders. Some Laval members were told to disappear quietly. Others were forced into a brutal choice: fall in line with the new leadership or face the same fate as the men who had just been wiped out. Genest's loyalty was tested directly. Senior angels Gilles Lenné Lachance and Jacques Lapelle Pelletier told him to prove himself. On April 7, 1985, Genest did just that by killing Laval prospect Claude Coco Roy near Montreal. Roy's body was later found in the St. Lawrence River, wrapped up and weighed down. Around the same time, police divers were also pulling the bodies of the massacre victims from the water. Investigators eventually connected Roy's death to the purge. They tracked the setup back to a meeting at the Motel Ideal in Saint-Basile-le-Grand. And the way Roy's body was disposed of matched exactly what was done to the massacre victims. It was clear this was part of the same cleanup operation. Genest was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison for Roy's murder. While inside, he officially left the Hells Angels in 1994. After spending decades behind bars, he finally walked out on full parole on March 3, 2010, at the age of 51. Number 3. Kadir Padir. Kadir Padir wasn't just another name in Berlin's underworld. He was the man pulling the strings for the Hells Angels' Berlin City crew. His rise started in 2010, when about 70 bandidos in Berlin, with Padir at the front, defected and switched sides. Police said they had never seen anything like it. That huge move created the Berlin City Charter of the Hells Angels, and Padir immediately stepped in as president. From there, he ran things with muscle and strategy. He had clubhouses under his control, loyal soldiers at his back, and even doormen working Berlin's nightlife spots. But in October 2013, the calm shattered. A 26-year-old rival named Tahir Özbek stabbed a Hells Angels bouncer in public. For Padir's crew, that wasn't just a fight, it was an open challenge. Payback wasn't optional, it was expected. On January 10, 2014, the response came. Just before midnight, 13 men, most of them masked, charged into the Expect betting shop in Reinickendorf. Özbek was inside a back room. One of the attackers, Recep O, fired 6 shots and killed him instantly. Witnesses called it an execution, quick and brutal, the kind of message that echoed far beyond the walls of that betting shop. Cops didn't just stop at the triggerman, they believed Padir had been the one who gave the order. Less than 2 weeks later, Padir surrendered, and that fall, Berlin kicked off its biggest biker trial ever. It dragged on for 5 years, with hundreds of witnesses testifying, hours of wiretaps played in court, and surveillance evidence laid out for the judges. The central question was clear. Did Padir greenlight the killing? On October 1, 2019, the answer came down hard. 8 Hells Angels, including shooter Recep O and Padir, were sentenced to life. Another member who turned state's witness got a shorter stretch. But for Padir, there was no escape. The judges ruled he was guilty of ordering the hit, even if he never touched the gun himself. His lawyers appealed, but Germany's highest criminal court upheld the verdict on February 7, 2022. They even scrapped a 2-year credit the lower court had given, making the life sentences tougher. The ruling spelled it out. The Berlin Hells Angels, under Padir, had carried out a planned team execution. Number 2. Jorn Jonke Nielsen. Jorn Jonke Nielsen was the man who brought the Hells Angels to Denmark and made sure they stayed. Born on June 5, 1960, he co-founded the first Danish Hells Angels chapter in Copenhagen's Nørrebro district in 1980. From that moment, he wasn't just a member. He became the loudest voice for the Angels in all of Scandinavia, and the man most associated with their rise in Northern Europe. The move that made him infamous came on May 25, 1984. Outside a home in Amager, he sprayed bullshit MC President Henning Norbert Mackerel Knudsen with submachine gun fire. Jonke fled the country, bouncing between France and Canada, but he couldn't run forever. He was caught, extradited, and sentenced to 16 years in prison for the murder. He didn't shy away from the spotlight even then. While on the run, he released his memoir, Mit Liv, in 1985. And even after being locked up, he continued to speak as the unofficial spokesman of the Hells Angels in Denmark. Reporters kept calling, and he never turned down the chance to push the club's image. During the bloody Nordic Biker War in 1996, the Bandidos even tried to assassinate him inside prison with grenades and gunfire. He survived and was later paroled in 1998. Freedom didn't mean peace. On August 12, 2001, a massive brawl broke out in Aalborg's nightlife district, Jomfru Anegade. A Hells Angels prospect stabbed Bandidos associate Flemming Jensen, and courts later ruled that Jonke had also kicked and stomped Jensen during the fight. He was first acquitted, but in September 2002, an appeals court overturned that and gave him 4 years for aggravated violence. In December 2007, he landed in the headlines again when he was stabbed on a Copenhagen street. This time he fought back, and in 2009 a jury cleared him, ruling it was self-defense. Jonke wasn't just about violence, he also built infrastructure for the Angels. In 2007 he helped create AK-81, a feeder crew that didn't require motorcycles or patches. It quickly grew, muscling into street markets and clashing with immigrant gangs. Police even said AK-81 expanded faster than the Angels themselves. For decades, he sold the story of the Angels to the public. He always claimed it was about brotherhood, while dismissing what cops and media said about crime. But after nearly 40 years, the club turned its back on him. On November 18, 2020, Jonke was expelled in bad standing. He announced it himself. Number 1. Ralph "Sonny" Barger. Ralph "Sonny" Barger wasn't just another biker. He became the face of the Hells Angels worldwide. Born on October 8, 1938, in Modesto, California, he co-founded the Oakland chapter in 1957 and turned it into the center of power that pushed the club from local rides to a global empire. Under his leadership, the Angels became more than just a motorcycle club. They became a brand, locking down trademarks and fiercely guarding their famous death head logo. For decades, Barger stayed the public voice and symbol of the Hells Angels. When he died at home in Livermore on June 29, 2022, at 83 years old from liver cancer, it truly felt like the end of an era. By the mid-60s, the Hells Angels were already making national headlines. On October 16, 1965, a group of Angels crashed an anti-Vietnam War march at the Berkeley-Oakland border and left 6 Angels arrested, along with a police officer badly injured with a broken leg. A month later, Barger called a press conference where he put the club in front of cameras. It was a stunt, but it worked. The Angels were cemented as headline material. Then came the disaster at Altamont on December 6, 1969. The Rolling Stones had hired the Hells Angels to handle security, paying them mostly in beer. As the concert spiraled out of control, 18-year-old Meredith Hunter pulled a handgun near the stage. Hells Angel Alan Passaro stabbed him to death, a killing caught on film in the documentary Gimme Shelter. Barger himself later said he pressed a pistol to Keith Richards and told him to keep playing as violence spread through the crowd. That one night ended the 60s peace and love dream in front of the entire world. Barger's personal record only got darker in the 70s. In 1972, he faced murder and arson charges but was acquitted. Soon after, police raided his Oakland home and found heroin. He admitted in court that he had been hiding drugs and trading them for weapons.
Of Sonny Barger's house, they are absolutely certain they're going to find drugs there.
In July 1974, his conviction for possession of heroin for sale was upheld, marking his first serious felony stretch. By the early 80s, his own habits caught up to him. After years of chain smoking 3 packs a day, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. Doctors removed his voice box in a laryngectomy. Barger learned to speak again with esophageal speech and even used his story as a warning against smoking. The late 80s brought his last major bust. After an Angel was killed in Kentucky, prosecutors said the club plotted revenge on the outlaws. In October 1988, a federal jury in Louisville convicted Barger of conspiring to transport explosives across state lines to kill rivals and destroy property. He served federal time, got out in the early 90s, and by 1998 had relocated to Arizona. Even then, he never stepped away. Still wearing the patch, still writing books, and still standing as the face of the Hells Angels until the day he died. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.